Hi students! This video will explain how to edit your literary paragraph. In class we've been working on our web pages. Some of you have historical web pages, some of you are going to have literary web pages. If you're working on a literary web page, then this video is for you. Now before you start writing, you need to recall the purpose of your paragraph. The first purpose of your paragraph is literary. You want to make sure that you're writing about how the poem that you were assigned relates to your specific location in Ireland. You also need to convince your viewers to come for your location. So both of those purposes must be achieved in your paragraph. Now, when writing your paragraph, you're going to have a specific format to follow. Your first sentence should be the topic sentence. The next part will be the evidence, which can be one or more sentences. Then comes the elaboration, which can also be one or more sentences. And you'll wrap up with the wrap-up sentence. Now, before you start writing, you need to remember the location that you were assigned. For this video, I'm going to use O'Connell Street as my example. Now, you guys have different locations that you're working with, whether it's Kilmaingal, Dublin Castle, River Liffey, or so forth. So don't write your paragraph about O'Connell Street. Please write your paragraph about the location you've been assigned. You're also going to want to look at your TP cast, and you're going to want to find 3 devices that you located in your poem. So in my case, in my poem about O'Connell Street, I found allusions, repetition, and imagery. So you should pick the device that you felt most comfortable with and understood the best. In my case, I'm going to select repetition. Therefore, if I'm writing about repetition and O'Connell Street, my topic sentence would read, O'Connell Street's literary significance shines clearly in the poem Easter 1916, written by W.B. Yeats, because its use of repetition shows the fight for Irish independence as terrible but necessary. Now, what you should notice about the topic sentence is the following. First, it mentions O'Connell Street and literary. Therefore, in your topic sentence, you want to mention the location that you're talking about, and you also want to talk about the literary perspective. Next, you want to make sure that you talk about the author and the name of the poem. Then comes the device of repetition, and you also want to say the purpose of the poem. So these 5 things should all occur in your topic sentence. Make sure to say the location you're writing about, the perspective you're taking, in this case literary. Make sure to say the title and the author. Make sure to name the device you're going to use, and then follow with the purpose of the poem. Feel free to use this topic sentence as a template that you can use to write your own. Now, pause this video and write your topic sentence, and when you're done, you can move on to the next sentence. For your next sentence, you're going to show your evidence that you got from research. So, my evidence is going to be an example of how repetition occurs in the poem. Because remember, I'm writing about how my poem on O'Connell Street uses repetition. So my evidence would say something like, for example, Yeats's poem repeats the line, "A terrible beauty is born," 3 times, including in the final line of the poem. Now, what's important about this sentence? Well, first, you want to include your transition word, or word. So I start this sentence out with, for example. You could start out your sentence with, for example, for instance, research shows, the poem explains, but you want to have some kind of transition that indicates to your readers that you're about to quote your poem and provide research. I also include the author's name, and I include that with a tag phrase. So the author's name is Yeats, and the tag phrase is, poem repeats the line. So you can't just start with your quote. You also can't go, for example, "A terrible beauty is born." That doesn't make sense. You need to explain what this quote is doing. So I explain Yeats's poem repeats the line, and then I put the line. So make sure to introduce what you're talking about with what we call a tag phrase. Then you also need to have a quote. So in your poem, find a quote that exemplifies the device that you're going to explain. So in my case, this line is repeated, and therefore that's what I'm going to quote. Now, pause this video and go and add your own evidence to your paragraph. And when you're done, you can move on to the next sentence. Once you're done with your evidence, you can move on to the elaboration. When writing your elaboration, you need to remember the evidence that you just wrote, because the elaboration is going to be about this evidence. Here is where you provide the information from your research. Now, you need to explain why it's important. So the evidence is what you read. The elaboration is explaining what that evidence means and why it matters. So I might write, repetition of a line is meant to emphasize. Yeats wants his audience to remember the events of Easter 1916 is both terrible and beautiful. How can something be both? How can this paradox be true? The rebellion against the British is terrible because people will be wounded and die in the fight. However, it is also beautiful because it will lead to the freedom Ireland has waited so long for. Now, what is important about these several sentences? The first thing is the sentence that reads, repetition of a line is meant to emphasize. What that does is it directly states the purpose of the repetition. So when you're writing your elaboration, start out by directly stating what your device is doing. Then you move on to the literal meaning of the quote. So what my quote literally meant is that Easter 1916 is both terrible and beautiful. So I explain that, literally. Then I add in some writing style. I use something called a rhetorical question to transition and to help my readers wonder, how could something be both terrible and beautiful? So I ask some questions to keep my paragraph moving. This is optional, but I would strongly suggest using something like a rhetorical question to spice up your writing. Then comes the purpose, where you talk about connotations. What is the repetition trying to communicate? Well, the repetition is trying to communicate that this war will be terrible because people will die, but it's also necessary and beautiful because it will lead to freedom. So make sure that you have a direct statement of purpose, a literal explanation of what the line means, something to spice up your writing, and also a thorough description of the connotations of your device. Now pause and take a minute to write the elaboration sentences for your paragraph. While you could potentially get away with one sentence for this section, it will likely need several sentences in order to successfully explain why the poem is important and to achieve your purposes. Next, you're going to go to the wrap-up. So the wrap-up is the last part of your paragraph. You might write something along the lines of, ultimately, Yeats's Easter 1916 offers both warning and encouragement to his readers. Through repetition, he warns them that their fight for freedom will be difficult and dangerous, but encourages them that it will be well worth the sacrifice. By traveling to O'Connell Street, tourists will be in the presence of the location that inspired Yeats's words. So what's important about this wrap-up? The first thing is that it starts with a transition, ultimately. You could use finally, in conclusion, in the end, most importantly, but you want to have some kind of transition that indicates that you're wrapping up your paragraph, and that you're going to essentially tell your readers what they need to leave with. Also, it includes the author and the title. So you want to make sure that you explain again who your author is and what the title of your poem is. And you see that right here. Next, you want to state the poem's purpose in a new way. Through repetition, he warns them that their fight for freedom will be difficult and dangerous, but encourages them that it will be well worth the sacrifice. We've already said this before, but we're saying it one more time in a new way to make sure our readers fully understand. And then last but not least, you want to state the website's purpose. So remember that your overall purpose is to convince people to visit your location. So make sure that the very end of your paragraph says something like, by visiting our location, you will get this, or you should visit our location because it will result in this. Encourage people to come see your location. Now, once you're all done, you should have a topic sentence, your evidence, your elaboration, and your wrap-up. So your paragraph should look something like this. Note that while my paragraph could be 4 sentences, it's not, because it's going to take several more sentences than just 4 to do my poem justice. Therefore, make sure that you're writing as much as you need to fully explain yourself. Ultimately, however, no matter how many sentences you have, they should still be able to break into these 4 organized sections. Now, if you have any questions, please try to mimic this example in front of you. Otherwise, feel free to send me an email, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Good luck, and I'll see you tomorrow in class.